There's 6/10. Is there a difference? No, there is not. It is the same answer regardless if you turn your 15/25 into a decimal place value or your 3/5. The decimal place value is still 6/10 or 60/100. It's the same value. One just has a 0 on the end and the other one does not. It's the same value. It doesn't matter. They represent the same amount. Now we have to take our decimal and turn it into a percent. Well, again on our paper, DP. Going from a decimal D to a percent P, we have to move to the right. How many spaces? 2. 1, 2. Got to put a placeholder 0 in there, so we end up at 60%. Okay, and then the last one. I want you to do this one on your own. I want you to make the fraction. Remember, it is shaded parts to all. Then you're going to turn that into a decimal and into a percent. Please turn your paper over. Come back to that in a minute, because now we're going to look at the other side of our paper, which is a little different. On this one, you have nothing shaded. You start with either a fraction, a decimal, or a percent, and you have to come up with how many of the boxes need to be shaded. So watch what happens. First of all, take your fraction and make it into a decimal. Well, by now, we should have memorized that 1/4 is equivalent to decimal to 5. And if we haven't, then you turn this into a decimal place value and you go from there. By now, though, ladies and gentlemen, you should have that one committed to memory. We should also have committed to memory that as a percent is 25%. If you do not, DP on your paper. Going from a decimal to a percent, you must move to the right. 2 spaces, add the percent sign. By now, that should be a given. That particular one should be a given. Now, coming back to shading the correct number of boxes. Watch how this works. You first need to count how many boxes you have. So we're going to do that the same way as we did before. 1, 2, 3, 4 on the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up the side. For a total number of how many boxes? 20. Watch what happens. We are looking for how many we have to shade. We don't know how many we have to shade. But if we go back to our original problem, we were given the fact that our fraction representation for how many should be shaded is 1/4. So we're going to write an equivalent fraction. 1/4 would be how many shaded boxes out of 20? Well, equivalent fractions. To get from 4 to 20, we multiply by 5. 1 times 5 is 5. So how many of these boxes need to be shaded to represent 1/4? 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This shaded area of this entire box now represents 1/4, which is the same as 25/100, which is the same as 25%. Let's look at the second one together. It gives us a decimal of decimal 5. Going from a decimal to a percent. Decimal 5, decimal to percent, we go to the right 2 times. What percent is that? We have to add a placeholder 0. It becomes 50%. What does 5/10 look like as a fraction? Well, 5 over 10. Is that in simplest form? No, it is not. They both divide by 5, leaving us with a fraction of 1/2. Now, you need to figure out how many of these squares need to be colored to represent 1/2. Well, before we can do that, we need to know how many total squares there are. So if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's count them again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on the side. So there are a total of 80 squares in this picture. So now I need to come up with how many of those squares need to be colored to represent 1/2 or 5/10 or 50% of that square. So I take one of my fractions, whether it's 5/10 or it is 1/2, it doesn't matter. They are equivalent. And I make that equal something over 80. How do I get from 2 to 80? Times 40. What I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. 1 times 40 is 40. So how many of these squares in this box need to be shaded to represent a fraction of 1/2? Well, 40 of them. If I know that there are 8 in each thing, or I can go this way. I know there are 10 this way. So I'm going to color all of these. 10, 20, 30, 40. If you look at that, is that half of that square being shaded? Yes, it is. Okay, last one. We'll do this one together, and I will give you a practice